Welcome to the Tambellini Group's Women in Technology Spotlight Series. In this series, we highlight the career paths, accomplishments, and perspectives of the remarkable women leading technology strategy in higher education. Today, we are lucky to be joined by Becky Frieden, the Director of Enterprise Applications and Decision Support Systems for New York Institute of Technology. Welcome, Becky.
Thank you so much. Great to be here this morning.
We're lucky to have you, and I'd like to kick things off by starting at the beginning. So, what did you want to be when you grew up and why?
That's always a hard question, right? I think everybody who thinks about that thinks that's a difficult question. I think for me, a lot of my career path and trajectory and honestly interest in promoting women came from, of course, my mother. My mother was one of those people who was way ahead of her time, I think, and really always pushed me to, be whatever I needed to be what I want to be, go where I want to go. And so early on, I really started thinking about, okay, what are the things I like to do? What are the things I'm good at? And math was my thing. I was good at math. And when you start looking for universities or programs or careers that are related to math back in the, early 80s, there were limitations, quite frankly. And so, but in the 80s, Wall Street was the icon. And so I thought, I really want to be an investment banker. That sounds terrific. It combines sort of my interests with sort of social activity and math. And I thought, okay, that is a terrific career. Unfortunately, when I graduated from college, the economy, went into a terrible, terrible nosedive, and that was never going to be a career for me. Banks were shutting left, right, and center, and it just wasn't a reality for me.
Okay, yes, during that bonfire of the vanities era that
That's
we
right.
we certainly see a return to that sort of mentality right now with the economic adversity that we're seeing very widespread in both the US and beyond. So
Absolutely. You wait long enough, it comes around again.
indeed, it does. Well, you certainly chose a career path that we know is very popular, and oftentimes a lot of institutions are looking now to uh, fill these positions that they can't. So, can you tell us about how you went from, okay, I'm going to be an investment banker, to now where you are today, what that education path and career trajectory looked like?
Sure, sure. So, as an undergrad in a Boston College Management School, I was a finance major. And at the time, there were very few women in finance, right? So, really instantly drawn to the handful of women that were around. But I also had a job in the financial aid office. As so many higher ed folks, I started out as a work study student in the financial aid office. And there was just a couple of terrific women mentors there who really fostered, sort of my love and understanding of higher ed and working in a higher ed community. And it turns out, in a good hindsight kind of way, I don't think I'd be a very good investment banker, and I work much better in a not-for-profit that promotes education. So it turned out to be a terrific career trajectory for me accidentally. So right out of school with the stock market in a tailspin, I went to work at a college in New Hampshire as an assistant director of financial aid. And I actually worked in financial aid for a little over a decade. I was the director of financial aid at Clark University, and I had a handful of other positions at other state schools. And I decided after about a decade that that wasn't where I wanted to continue to spend my time, but I didn't want to leave higher ed. And the dean of admissions at Clark decided that I was, I guess, worth investing in, and he carved out a position in IT for me that was sort of that interesting niche between higher ed and technology and people, the intersection of those two. And so he let me come over to the IT office and, work at Clark for, I stayed for another 10 years or so working in IT, working my way up. And I really, really enjoyed that ability to think about process and people, and then how to leverage technology to be effective at it. In the same time frame, I was asked to contribute as an adjunct faculty member to the MBA program at Clark, teaching database design. And honestly, it was nothing I had formal training in, but I learned on the fly. And again, it was all about that intersection of people and management and strategy and the technology. And so I've been teaching at Clark for 15 years in the MBA program, leading MBA students to be better data managers and use the technology to make good business decisions. So I really enjoy that intersection. And the two really inform each other. My day job makes me a better faculty member, and my faculty job makes me a better day employee. I have to stay on my toes and current with technology. After a couple of decades at Clark, the CIO left Clark and went to New York Institute of Technology and called me and said, I've got some new challenges for you. Are you interested? And so here I am in New York a couple of years later.
Wow. So it's interesting that you say the IT director at Clark said, well, even though you're not an IT person, you're someone I should bring in here. I mean, that's something we hear all the time now. It sounds so prescient because they're saying everyone's job is technology, and people who just know the technology that maybe at that time would have seemed like on paper the perfect hire. Now they want the people, especially in higher ed, who understand how different things work and the interrelationships between them. So you certainly had a mentor and champion there who was ahead of the curve.
Really, really did. And yeah, I think he understood the value of communication skills too, right? I mean, there's people that can speak tech speak, but the lay user is not going to understand that. So somebody can do that translation. And we're seeing that everywhere in our industry now, right? Analysts are really the golden ticket right now.
Yes, so it's being those interlocutors between these different areas and branches with the interdependent needs too. Um,
Absolutely.
well, it's a great segue into the next question. You talked about these two jobs or these two roles that you occupy in teaching and in your daily work, running enterprise applications and decision support, complementing each other. So can you tell us a little bit about what a week in the life of Becky Frieden looks like?
Sure, I'd love to. I think this is part of the thing that I love the most about my job is that there's no such thing as a typical day or week or year. Everything is different and interesting and new. Even if you've sort of done it before, it's going to be different this time. So I have two groups that report to me at New York Tech. I have the Enterprise Applications Group, which consists of a lot of developers and project managers. And I also have the decision support team, which are really the data people. And I love the fact that I have that chance to bring those two groups together because they really rely on each other so much to make good strategy for the university. So I'm enjoying sort of building community between the two groups. So that we can really, have a significant impact on the strategy of the organization. Officially, that administrative applications or enterprise systems, Gartner defines my field as being 20% project management and 80% system maintenance. But we're seeing such a huge shift in the way that works because of SaaS-based solutions and just the huge demand on the complexity of administrative systems now between regulatory and compliance issues and just good student success factors. So we're really seeing a epic shift to much, much, much more time and effort spent on projects and enhancing processes, and a little less on maintenance and outsourcing maintenance to people who are actually experts in it, which we are not. So I think that part of it is a terrific shift. And I really love the problem solving part of this, right? How do we take a high level strategy or goal of the organization and transform that into something that's really tangible that students and faculty and staff will feel the impact from?
It's fascinating to hear that Gartner is just defining that sort of, I think you said 80/20.
80/20.
I heard you say that. I thought, is that right? Because as you said, it's all SaaS based now. So I'm surprised they still see it that way.
Yeah, I'm hoping that, that the shift is happening, just like the budget models, that the shift in really the reality and the definition of our work is transforming into much more high impact, right? Less sort of low impact work and much more high impact work.
Yeah, ideally. Well, that leads to our next question, which is what is the greatest satisfaction you get from your work? We can talk about a specific project that you've just finished, or I know no projects are technically ever finished, but if there's a specific milestone you've reached or something that you've been able to accomplish with your team that you are wanting to highlight for us today.
Oh, absolutely. As I mentioned before, for me, the thrill is that intersection of people and technology.
Mhm.
It's never really the technology in and of itself, but how, the humanity uses the technology to make all of our lives richer and better. And so that and the sort of the problem solving aspect of my nature really go together. And, like so many schools, we have embarked on a digital transformation initiative. And I know people are tired of hearing that word and so many very definitions of what is transformative, right? And so our president actually defined it for us, and his definition really lives around making students' lives better. And so what I like to think about this project for us was the metaphor really lives around a student's physical life, right? They come to campus and they go to a classroom and they interact with faculty and they have an academic life. And then they go to the library or to the cafeteria or to some kind of social group and they have a social life. And then, they have the nuisance of dealing with sort of administrative tasks, right? And so, what we've embarked on at New York Tech is to transform their digital version of that in all of the aspects, right? So in an academic world, what did we do? We're working on the LMS, we're working on other kinds of academic systems. So we're rolling out new programs for them to enhance their digital academic life. We just embarked on a major transformative project on the administrative applications to deliver a new UI for all of their sort of administrative world. And then we
Mhm.
just launched a new campus app to enhance their social life. So, what brings them together digitally in community through a new app. And there's all kinds of applications that bring sort of that social, the Greek life and the student activities and clubs and other kinds of co curricular things into a new app. And so, we're looking at each one of those components and saying, okay, this is their physical life. Now let's replicate this in the digital world. And because so many students are remote now and COVID was such a catalyst for all of this, that it's become as important, if not more important than the physical campuses. So we're almost done with, significant number of those projects, and students are already starting to see a major, major improvement in sort of their digital ecosystem. So it's really been a really fun project to see their reaction and that the transformative qualities that have come out of some of this. We're looking at analytics already and seeing strong reaction from our students, so it's really kind of fun.
That's awesome to be able to see the needle be moved by that. And I can imagine you can see the statistics, and those can be very encouraging. But I've often found that it's those anecdotal things like maybe that one comment you get or story from one student that can be the most satisfying because it brings it to life in terms of what you have intended to do and the results that you're seeing.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's just so fun to see. And, I look at our student population. It's a very different population that I've ever worked with before, with a significant number of Pell eligible students and a lot of first generation students. And to be able to see that direct impact of, oh, you enabled me to do this, or you enabled me to do that, is really, really fulfilling.
That's awesome. Well, we've talked a lot about the good stuff, and our next question deals with maybe something that's not so good or still a bit of an enigma, and that is our question about the genie in the bottle, which is, if you could have a magical genie come down and they could grant you one answer to a question you have about something in higher ed technology, how the direction's going to change, or a specific product line or anything, what would you want to know about the future?
Well, that's a really interesting question, right? I mean, in light of COVID, there's so many things I wish I had known, right? And in terms of, even this started before COVID, but budget models changing in the way that technology has been sourced, and so I think a lot about, had I known that, what would I have done differently? Um, so all of that in hindsight now, I guess I would want to know a little bit more about sort of what is the new normal, and what does remote learning look like in the future, and where is that intersection of brick and mortar, and how can will technology better enable the human and interactive and relatable learning in the future. And I'd love to know that, because right now I feel like we're living in limbo, and
Really?
someday we won't be, but when is that, and what will it look like? Because I'd love to get a jump start on, how do we make things more relatable for our students? Is it going to be augmented reality and virtual reality systems? Is it going to be more speech recognition kinds of things? What are the technologies that are going to make all of us better learners and, enhance humanity?
Yeah, there were definitely some, like when we think of the VR and the AR, that were touted as those are really going to take off during the pandemic. Didn't seem to happen so much.
Not yet.
Well, great to see when, if and when we reach that new equilibrium and where that sweet spot is for everyone, as obviously the pandemic continues, but if you did have a lot of on-campus learning at your institution now, that's definitely back in full swing, regardless of what happens, knock on wood. Um, but I guess we want to sum things up here by asking about your advice for other leaders in or budding leaders in this field of higher education technology. There's obviously a lot of uncertainty. It's a field of constant change. What advice do you have for navigating this industry?
I think this one applies to any industry, but especially our industry, and we're so vested in what we do, especially in higher ed technology, and we care so deeply. I think that there's a certain personality trait that attracts us to this field. And one of the best pieces of advice that have ever gotten, and will pass on to everyone I possibly can, is really about feedback. And it's really that feedback is a gift. That we as humans, we're never going to be perfect, and the reality is you're always going to get feedback. So if someone is willing to give it to you, then treat it like it's intended. It's not personal, but it's designed to make you or your team or your work or your efforts, better. I think about the digital transformation project we just finished, and wow, did we get a lot of feedback from our students about the app design? A lot of feedback, good and bad.
Right.
But I do look at it as a gift, and I think, okay, I don't have a student lens anymore, and it's really terrific to see it from their student lens, even though I'm like, ooh, ooh, we did that on purpose, but they don't like it, you know. But without that, I wouldn't know. So the feedback really is a gift, and most of us, our intentions are very pure, and we want to do a good job. And so if you get feedback, it's just meant to tinker with you on the margin. It's not meant to, completely transform your personality. So take it as it's intended.
A learning opportunity, not a bruise to the ego.
Absolutely.
I like that advice, and I'll take that to heart as well next time I'm getting some. Oh, I meant to do that for a good thing, but it obviously wasn't received that way. So,
Absolutely.
well, thank you, Becky, so much for taking the time today to share all your insights with us. I'm sure our listeners and viewers will really appreciate hearing your perspective. And you're our first actual guest as who's the director of enterprise applications. So
Oh, that's
appreciate you
terrific.
being our pioneer in that area as well.
I'm delighted, and it was great to be with you this morning.
Likewise. All right, that's